It was a quiet morning on the Texas frontier. Jeff Turner, rifle in hand, had just set off to hunt, leaving behind his wife and 3 young sons. The air was thick with the peace of a new day until in a flash the sound of gunfire shattered the silence. Screams echoed from his cabin, followed by the war cries of the Comanche. In less than an hour, his entire world crumbled, his wife, his children slaughtered. By the time Turner reached his home, all he could do was stand frozen, staring at the bodies of his family, blood staining the earth where they once played. And then something snapped inside him. His thoughts swirled with a singular purpose. Revenge, the future he had once dreamed of for his family. The peaceful life he had worked so hard to build was gone. In its place, only the sharp pain of loss and a burning desire for justice. The fire flickered before him, casting long shadows in the still night air as Turner sat alone by the campfire on Chicolette Creek, northeast of Victoria. His hunting knife gripped tightly in his hand, he stared into the flames, haunted by the memories of that day. Each night he faced the same agonizing choice: stay awake and endure the torment of his grief, or sleep and risk the nightmares that would drag him back to the horror. What would you do if everything you loved was torn away in the blink of an eye? Would you fight for revenge or let the grief consume you? Turner chose the hunt for the Comanche who had taken everything from him, but at what cost? Would his thirst for retribution ever bring him peace, or would it only deepen the hole left in his heart? Jeff Turner grew up in Kentucky, where he built a solid life as a farmer near Beech Fork. Alongside his wife and 3 young sons, he worked a small but successful farm raising crops and livestock to support his family. Their days were filled with the steady rhythm of farm chores, and though life wasn't lavish, it was comfortable with enough to keep them content and secure. One day a stranger stopped by their farm asking for a meal and a place to rest for the night. This wasn't unusual in Kentucky at the time, and the Turners welcomed him to their table. Over dinner, the travelers shared stories of a place called Texas, a vast open land brimming with opportunity. He spoke of fertile soil perfect for farming, rolling hills teeming with wild game, and rivers full of fish, all free for any settler bold enough to claim it. His words painted a picture of a new start, where hard work could lead to real wealth. That conversation stuck with Turner. Though his family was doing fine, their modest life offered little chance to build something bigger, something lasting for his sons, or to ensure his wife's comfort if he were gone. The idea of Texas took root in his mind, growing into an obsession. He couldn't stop thinking about the chance to give his family a brighter future, one where they could thrive, not just get by. For months he wrestled with the decision, knowing it meant leaving everything familiar behind. His wife wasn't convinced at first. The stories of Texas weren't all about promise tales of Comanche raids, brutal and merciless, had reached even Kentucky. She worried about trading their steady life for a dangerous unknown. But Turner was persistent, arguing that the potential rewards outweighed the risks. After long discussions, he persuaded her, and they made the tough call to sell their farm. With their belongings packed and a decent profit from the sale, the Turner family set out for the Republic of Texas, chasing a dream of a better life. After a long journey from Kentucky, the Turner family arrived in the Republic of Texas in the fall, first spending a few weeks near San Antonio to get their bearings. They soon followed the Guadalupe River southeast, settling on a promising plot of land, likely near what's now Seguin or Gonzales. The area was rich with potential, and Jeff Turner, along with his 2 older sons, set to work building a sturdy log cabin, while the family began clearing the dense brush and bramble to prepare the land for crops. The soil was as fertile as the traveler had promised, and the nearby creek offered clear water and a steady supply of fish. Even Turner's wife, who had been hesitant about leaving Kentucky, started to embrace their new home. The land was bountiful, and Jeff kept the family well fed with game from the surrounding hills. The hardships of the move began to feel worth it as they carved out a new life. One early May morning, Jeff headed out to hunt rifle in hand, leaving behind a peaceful scene. His 3 sons, all under 10, played near the creek, rolling wooden hoops with sticks, their laughter filling the air. His wife worked in the small vegetable garden by the cabin, singing softly as she tended to the plants. The moment felt perfect, a snapshot of the life they'd dreamed of. But that tranquility shattered in an instant. While hunting less than a mile away, Jeff heard a sudden barrage of gunfire followed by screams, a chilling mix of triumphant war cries and the desperate shouts of his family. Panic surged through him as he sprinted back toward the cabin, his heart pounding with dread. As he rounded a bend, the sight that met him was beyond comprehension. His wife lay dead inside the cabin, clutching their youngest son in her arms, both pale from blood loss. Near the back door, his 2 older sons, still boys, lay lifeless, their bodies bloodied and scalped. Before Jeff could process the horror, the Comanche raiders returned, dismounting and approaching the cabin, unaware he was there. Blind with grief and rage, Jeff acted on instinct. He fired his loaded rifle, dropping one warrior with a shot to the heart. Drawing his large hunting knife, he charged the others, slashing and stabbing in a frenzy, wounding several as they scrambled to escape. The raiders, caught off guard, fired back, and Jeff collapsed, riddled with bullets, his blood soaking the dirt near his family's bodies. Hours later, a neighbor passing by noticed the eerie silence of the usually lively Turner farm. Investigating, he found the gruesome scene, Jeff barely alive, sprawled across a Comanche warrior, his hand still gripping the knife, buried deep in the enemy's chest. 3 other warriors lay nearby, each with fatal wounds from Jeff's blade. With great effort, the neighbor managed to pull Jeff from the carnage, drape him over a horse, and get him to safety at his own home. There, with help from his family and others, they tended to Jeff's wounds, though most believed he wouldn't survive. For weeks, Jeff battled fever and excruciating pain, his body fighting to heal. Physically, he pulled through, but his mind was broken. The memories of that day were too heavy, and even brief interactions with others drained him. The man who had once dreamed of a thriving future for his family was now a shell haunted by loss and unable to connect with the world around him. After the devastating loss of his family, Jeff Turner turned his back on the dreams that had brought him to Texas. Farming family and the hope of a prosperous future were gone, replaced by a single consuming purpose: revenge. He left behind any thought of rebuilding a normal life and chose instead to live alone in the wilds of Central Texas, far from settlements and society. His days were now dedicated to tracking Comanche warriors, moving silently through their territories, learning their trails, and striking when they least expected it. Turner became a one-man force of retribution, launching relentless attacks against the Comanche. He ambushed small groups or lone warriors, using his hunting skills and knowledge of the land to outmaneuver them. His actions were brutal, driven by the pain of his loss, and he didn't just kill, he took scalps as grim trophies, a chilling reminder of his mission. Word of his campaign spread among the settlers, who began to see him as both a protector and a haunted figure. They were grateful for his efforts, as his attacks disrupted Comanche raids, but they also feared him. His solitary existence and unyielding drive made him seem more like a ghost than a man, someone whose grief had turned him into something fierce and untouchable. Turner set up a small, isolated camp on Chicolette Creek, north of Victoria, where he lived with only his horse, Pepperpod, for company. His tent was a stark reflection of his new life, its walls lined with the scalps he'd taken, each one a marker of his vengeance. He had no interest in rejoining the world, avoiding long conversations or connections with others. His sole focus was the next trail, the next fight, the next scalp. For Turner, revenge wasn't just a goal, it was the only thing keeping him going, the only way he could face the memories that haunted him. In his mind, every Comanche he hunted was a step toward justice for the family he'd lost, even as the cost of his mission left him more alone than ever. One day, Jeff Turner rode into a nearby settlement to pick up supplies, his solitary routine briefly interrupted by the buzz of activity in town. The settlement was alive with talk about a group of Texas Rangers who had just arrived, led by a 23-year-old rookie named William Bigfoot Wallace. The Rangers were visibly frustrated, their pride bruised after a Comanche raiding party had slipped into their camp the previous night and stolen every one of their horses. Forced to walk into town carrying their saddles, the young rangers were eager to set things right. Determined to pursue the raiders, the rangers struck a deal with a local rancher who had just brought in a fresh herd of horses. The animals were barely broken, and it took careful effort to saddle and mount them, but within 15 minutes, the rangers were ready to hit the trail, fueled by a mix of anger and determination to reclaim their horses and their dignity. Wallace, though new to leadership and nervous about facing the Comanche, took charge, aware of the dangers but unsure of how to track the elusive raiders. As the rangers rode out, Turner approached them on his raw-boned horse, Pepper Pod. He cut a striking figure, tall and lean, dressed in worn buckskin, with a coonskin cap perched on his head. His gear included an old Kentucky rifle slung over his shoulder, a tomahawk, and a scalping knife tucked into his belt, the handle stained with what looked like dried blood. His eyes, sharp and intense, seemed to burn with a restless energy that unsettled the young rangers. At first they tensed, unsure if he was friend or foe, their hands inching toward their weapons. Turner broke the tension by speaking plainly. He told Wallace and the rangers about the Comanche raid that had killed his wife and 3 sons a decade earlier, a tragedy that had driven him to his solitary life of vengeance. He claimed to have collected 46 Comanche scalps, which he kept in his camp on Chicolette Creek, and said his mission was to keep hunting them until he couldn't anymore. He offered to guide the rangers, boasting that he knew every watering hole and trail from their current spot all the way to the Rio Grande. He assured them the Comanche feared him, avoiding paths he was known to stalk. The rangers exchanged uneasy glances. Turner's wild demeanor and grim trophies made them wary, and his story of loss and vengeance was hard to process, but they couldn't deny his value. Wallace, in particular, recognized that Turner's tracking skills and deep knowledge of the land could be the edge they needed against the Comanche, especially since none of the rangers had much experience in this kind of pursuit. Despite their reservations, they agreed to let Turner lead the way, hoping his expertise would help them catch the raiders and recover their horses. With that, Turner spurred Pepper Pod forward, and the rangers followed, setting off on a tense and uncertain mission. With Jeff Turner leading the way, the Texas Rangers rode westward, chasing the Comanche who had stolen their horses. Turner's tracking skills proved invaluable as he read signs in the dirt and brush that the young rangers couldn't even spot. Over several days, he guided them across hard, rocky terrain, pausing only briefly when the trail grew faint, then quickly picking it up again. The rangers struggled to keep pace, often pushing their horses to a trot to match Turner's relentless drive. His knowledge of the land, honed by years of hunting, Comanche kept them on the raiders' trail. As the sun dipped low one evening, Turner suddenly halted, signaling the group to stay quiet. He'd spotted the Comanche camp about a quarter-mile away, nestled in a clearing. The raiders had set up a cold camp, likely preparing to rest for the night, unaware of the approaching danger. With daylight fading fast, Turner urged an immediate attack to catch them off guard. The rangers spurred their horses and charged, closing the distance quickly, but the Comanche noticed them when they were about 50 yards out. The warriors grabbed their rifles, bows, and arrows, firing a sharp volley that forced the rangers to dismount and take cover. The fight erupted into a chaotic 20-minute clash in the dim light, with gunfire and arrows cutting through the thick brush. Bigfoot Wallace, the young ranger leader, nearly took an arrow to the chest when a Comanche stepped from behind a tree, aiming a shot that looked as long as a spear. Wallace dove behind another tree just in time, the arrow grazing the bark. Shaken, he tried to return fire, but his nerves made his hands tremble, and his shot went wide, a stark reminder of how green he and his men were compared to the seasoned Comanche. Turner, however, was in his element. He moved through the chaos with eerie calm, firing his Kentucky rifle, reloading with practiced speed, and closing in on his targets. His precision was matched by a chilling intensity as he scalped each fallen warrior, his knife flashing in the twilight. The rangers watched in shock as he worked, his face set in a mix of focus and grim satisfaction, seemingly oblivious to the danger around him. As the Comanche began to retreat, one warrior tried to escape on a ranger horse tied to a tree, but got tangled in the rope. Turner took aim, dropped him with a single shot, and scalped him before the body stopped moving. In the final moments of the fight, a piercing Comanche war cry rang out, followed by a gunshot. A ranger fell, clutching his face and shouting that he was done for. The group spotted a Comanche warrior lying in the grass, 30 yards away, barely alive, but still gripping his rifle. He'd risen just long enough to fire one last shot before collapsing, his body later found with 7 bullet wounds. Turner appeared moments later, kneeling to scalp the warrior. For a brief second, his expression softened, as if the act brought him a fleeting sense of peace amidst the bloodshed. When the dust settled, the Rangers discovered their wounded comrade was lucky the bullet had only grazed his head, leaving a shallow cut. They regrouped, recovering most of their stolen horses, and built a campfire to rest. As they ate, the mood lightened, and one ranger shared a story about how he'd fired repeatedly at a tree stump, mistaking it for a charging Comanche. The group laughed, and to everyone's surprise, Turner let out a loud chuckle, a rare glimpse of the man he might have been. But the moment passed quickly. His face darkened, and he sank back into his usual quiet, somber state, the weight of his past pulling him under again. After the intense battle with the Comanche, Jeff Turner and the Texas Rangers rode back to the Zumwalt settlement, their recovered horses in tow. The journey was quiet, the group weary from the fight and the long days on the trail. When they reached the settlement, Turner didn't linger. He offered a short, matter-of-fact goodbye. His voice low and without ceremony, then turned his horse, Pepperpod, toward the horizon. With fresh Comanche scalps dangling from his belt, he headed back to his isolated camp on Chicolette Creek, slipping away as quickly as he'd appeared. The Rangers watched him go, still processing the man who'd led them to victory, but remained a stranger in his grief. Over the months and years that followed, Turner became a familiar, if infrequent, sight at the Zumwalt settlement. He'd ride in every so often to trade for supplies, ammunition, food, or other essentials, always alone, always with new scalps tied to his gear. Each visit was brief, his interactions limited to what was necessary. Settlers whispered about him, sharing stories of his solitary hunts and the growing number of trophies in his tent. His presence was a reminder of both the dangers of the frontier and the personal toll it could exact his silent resolve, leaving an impression on everyone who saw him. For Bigfoot Wallace, the young ranger leader, the time spent with Turner was unforgettable. The encounter stayed with him long after they parted ways, shaping how he saw the harsh realities of life in Texas. Turner's story of losing his family to a Comanche raid and his transformation into a relentless avenger showed Wallace the depths of personal tragedy and the kind of violence that defined the frontier. It was a lesson in the cost of survival, one that left Wallace with a mix of respect and unease for the man who'd fought alongside him. Turner's impact lingered, a vivid chapter in Wallace's early days as a ranger, coloring his understanding of the land and the people who fought to claim it. Years after his time with Jeff Turner, Bigfoot Wallace wrote in his memoirs that he never learned what became of the haunted frontiersman. The mystery of Turner's end lingered unanswered in the public record. But in December 1932, in a hotel room in El Paso, Texas, an aging cowboy named Frank Collinson shared a different story with historian J. Frank Dobie. Collinson, who had known Wallace personally, revealed 2 accounts of Turner's death that Wallace had confided in him privately. These stories, too grim for the Victorian readers of Wallace's earlier published works, painted a vivid and brutal picture of how Turner's life might have ended. In one account, Turner's relentless campaign against the Comanche finally caught up with him. While camping alone in a remote South Texas spot, sleeping under the stars without a fire to avoid detection, he was ambushed by a Comanche war party. They recognized him instantly as the feared scalp hunter who had killed so many of their people. To the Comanche, Turner wasn't just an enemy. His fierce spirit was believed to hold puha, a powerful spiritual force that resided in all things from rocks to warriors. They saw his heart as a source of great strength, making him a target for a rare and horrific ritual. Bound and battered, Turner was dragged to the camp of a Comanche chief. Under the harsh morning sun, he was staked to the ground, his arms and legs tied to wooden pegs driven deep into the earth. Warriors surrounded him, taunting and striking him as the chief emerged from his lodge, his face hard with rage. The chief's pregnant wife was then brought out, her body painted with ritual designs and adorned with feathers, her expression calm but distant. For agonizing minutes, the chief toyed with Turner, brandishing a large buffalo hunting knife and making mock attacks. Then, with deliberate cruelty, he cut into Turner, removing his heart. The chief's wife consumed it, believing it would pass Turner's strength to her unborn child. What remained of Turner was discarded, and he was never seen again at the Zumwalt settlement or anywhere else. Though the story of Jeff Turner's brutal death at the hands of the Comanche circulated among those who knew him, his exact fate remains a mystery, shrouded in the uncertainty of the frontier. What is clear is that he likely met his end caught in the same cycle of violence and anger that defined his life after losing his family. His relentless pursuit of vengeance, while driven by profound loss, consumed him, leaving no room for peace or redemption in a land marked by constant conflict. Turner's name lived on especially among older Texans who passed down his tale through generations. To them, he was more than a man. He was a symbol of the deep tragedy and torment that shaped so many lives in the Old West. His story of a happy family torn apart, a life remade by grief, and a solitary quest for retribution resonated as a stark reminder of the personal costs paid by those who ventured into Texas during its wildest years. Even today, his legend lingers, whispered by those who remember the hardships of that era. Turner's life also mirrors the broader history of Texas in the 1840s, a time of relentless violence and retribution. The Comanche, fiercely defending their hard-won territory, clashed with Texians eager to claim the land for themselves. Mexicans, Apache, Tonkawa, and others were caught in the same brutal struggle, each group fighting for survival or dominance. Raids, ambushes, and massacres were common, leaving scars on the land and its people. Turner's story, while unique in its intensity, was just one thread in a tapestry of conflict that defined the frontier, where hope and loss walked hand in hand. His legacy endures as a window into a time when survival demanded a heavy price and vengeance often became a way of life.